Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Vought, for being here. I have a couple of things that I want to try to cover, but I want to follow up on a statement that you made not that long ago regarding a program that I'm quite familiar with, having spent 25 years in local government, and that's the Community Development Block Grant Program. And I want to make sure I got this right. I think I heard you say that it's your analysis, or the analysis of the administration, that the Community Development Block Grant Program has demonstrated no economic value. Is that accurate? Is that an accurate statement of your views?
It's that we think that the program has been effective from the standpoint of federal taxpayers. We understand that it will certainly offset costs that state and localities would.
But is that the reason? Is that the reason that Democrats and Republicans have come together to fund CDBG just to offset local government costs, or is there something greater than that? In other words, has it been traditionally a legitimate public investment that has a return to the federal government?
We would disagree as to whether the return to the federal government has been worth the cost, but I'm
so do you think that the federal government benefits, for example, when there's a reduction in crime in a community? Is that a public value that the government has a stake in?
Certainly, but we wouldn't say that the CDBG program is the only
So
way.
on what basis have you come to the conclusion that the CDBG program does not contribute to a reduction in crime? I mean, do you have, for example, any published peer-reviewed studies that demonstrate that the CDBG program does not deliver economic value to the federal government?
We don't.
And even specifically on the issue of reduction in crime, or any other subject, any other category?
We believe it's important to reduce crime. We believe that's something that we adequately fund at the Department of Justice resources.
So you think crime is adequately funded, fighting crime in this country is adequately funded? We don't need to do anything else to help communities create infrastructure that reduces crime. Let me just give you an example, because this is a very sore subject for me. Having spent a lot of time working in communities across the country and in my own hometown to deal with blight and abandoned property and seeing the impact they have. I have here a published peer-reviewed study from the Journal of Criminal Justice that points out that the eligible activities in CDBG, which include demolition of vacant and abandoned properties, has a positive impact on violent crime. And it's just one of many studies that I would cite. In fact, Mr. Chairman, if I could ask unanimous consent to have this study included in the record of the committee, I would certainly appreciate that.
Without objection.
I guess the question I have, just to move from this, because obviously I think you and I disagree, and of course many of my Democratic and Republican colleagues who seem quite willing to show up at ribbon-cutting ceremonies that include CDBG dollars obviously also disagree with you on this subject. But I understand your point that you assert that cutting taxes contributes to economic growth and has a positive overall impact ultimately on tax revenues. I disagree with the analysis, but I understand that's your point of view. Do you ever believe that there is a circumstance where increased spending has the effect of reducing a deficit?
I can't think of a scenario.
So you don't believe that, for example, if the National Institutes of Health were able to somehow, through the work of this Congress, double the amount of research into diabetes, and if the amount of research going into diabetes led to, in 5 years, a cure for diabetes, do you think that would have a positive impact on deficits, on spending, on the overall impact that dreaded disease has on our economy?
It would certainly have positive impact.
So cutting the National Institutes of Health, by definition then, could reduce the possibility of that positive impact. Is that correct?
We don't think so, and not by definition is there an assumption that when you take money from federal taxpayers and you contribute it to worthy investments, which we believe that $33 billion is a worthy investment for the National Institute of Health.
But not worthy enough to maintain it at its current level. Not worthy enough to take the bet, for example, that those people out there who happen to be United States taxpayers, who are suffering with diseases like diabetes, multiple sclerosis, Alzheimer's, shouldn't at least be able to be given a chance by supporting important research that would not only potentially ease their suffering, which for me is ample justification, and I think actually for most Americans would be ample justification, but using your values, which I don't think we necessarily share, it potentially and probably almost certainly will lead to significant reductions in the cost of health care in this country. Easing suffering does not necessarily mean we can't also do something positive, have a positive economic impact. So whether it is research into dreaded diseases, cleaning up abandoned houses in beat-up old neighborhoods, or, for example, the reduction that you
Gentleman's time has
propose
expired.
in drinking water, clean drinking water, what I would simply suggest is consider internalizing the positive and negative externalities in these decisions, and I think what you'll find is that a different set of priorities would take us a lot further. I yield back.
Can I briefly respond?
You may respond.
I think it's a fair point, sir, and I don't want to suggest that some of the research advances that we make at National Institute of Health wouldn't have a long-term impact on the cost of paying for coverage for those diseases for the people that benefit from healthcare programs. We haven't done the sorts of economic analysis to tell you what those would be, but I do think it matters as to where the investments that we're making and not making just a blanket statement that just because it's dollar of federal spending that it's going to result in some kind of dynamic growth. I think that's what I would reject on the back end, but I take your point.
Gentleman's time has expired.